Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the 1001 Movies podcast, based on the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. This time we'll be talking about the 1999 horror film The Blair Witch Project, directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez.
I am so sorry for everything that has happened. Because in spite of what Mike says now, it is my fault. Because it was my project. And I insisted. I insisted on everything. I insisted that we weren't lost. I insisted that we keep going. I insisted that we walk south. Everything had to be my way. And this is where we've ended up. And it's all because of me that we're here now. Hungry and cold and hunted.
In the mid-90s, Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez met while studying film at the University of Central Florida. They collaborated on some short films together, and after Myrick's graduation in 1994, they began work on a faux documentary about the mythical Blair Witch. The initial idea was to make a film comprised mostly of mock interviews with their friends and family members, talking about the story and mystery surrounding the witch and the strange goings-on around the small town of Blair, Maryland. This idea was soon eclipsed by a feature-length film cloaked ostensibly as a found footage movie and centered on the exploits of three hapless film students as they hike deep into the woods to shoot a documentary on the Blair Witch. The Blair Witch Project was shot in just 8 days, and part of its popularity arose from the way it was made. The bulk of the movie was filmed by the three main actors as a film within a film. Myrick and Sanchez didn't write a traditional script, but rather had a story treatment with discernible acts or days, as well as character treatments for each of their actors. During the shoot, 3 or 4 times a day, the actors were left written instructions at checkpoints within the woods on what to say and how to act, as well as food, water, camera equipment, and batteries as needed. The actors never knew what would happen more than a few hours ahead of time, and they were instructed to react to each other as well as whatever situations they would come across. Each night during the shoot involved another haunting from within the woods, and this was done by the crew making noises from outside the actors' tent with boom boxes and whatever else they had on hand. This experimental method proved disastrous on the first evening, with actor Heather Donahue chasing the crew too far away into the woods. Donahue initially jumped almost too far into her role, antagonizing her fellow actors relentlessly the third day out amidst high tensions while the weather seemed to work against them, enveloping everything in rain. At the end of this day, the filmmakers put the cast up in a hotel room and subsequently reshot the entire third day, but at the end they decided to use the original footage, as the wet atmosphere added to the real-life tension among the actors. By the end of the 8th day, both cast and crew had gotten the hang of things quite well, and it shows. During the nightly hauntings, the terror seen on the actors' faces is quite real, and one can actually hear the fatigue in their voices by the end of the film. The marketing for the Blair Witch Project is now legendary. It's unclear whether the idea was conceived by the filmmakers or the executives at Artisan, the company that distributed the film, probably the latter, but the film was touted on the premise that it was actual, real-life found footage discovered in the Maryland woods. In the months before the film's release, audiences were encouraged to read the film's website, which had bios of the three actors, as well as implications that they were never seen alive again. This, along with the buzz that the film would do for camping, what Jaws did for swimming, ensured success at the box office. Many audience members believed that these three students had actually disappeared into the woods, and Heather Donahue's mother even got sympathy letters in the mail. With a budget of $60,000, although some reports list the budget as around $22,000, the film made it to the Guinness Book of World Records as the highest budget-to-box office ratio to date, and it grossed over $140 million by Halloween of 1999, 3 months after its release. The unique brand of marketing had worked, and even critics showered the film with praise. The very next year, Myrick and Sanchez returned to write the abominable Blair Witch 2 Book of Shadows, and the less that is said about that film, the better. According to IMDb, a third film in the series is in development. As for the filmmakers, Daniel Myrick went on to make a few short films, all of which were related in one way or another to the Blair Witch Project, and a 2008 war film, The Objective. Eduardo Sanchez, meanwhile, directed a segment of 2013's VHS 2, as well as 2006's surprisingly effective Altered. He has made films such as Lovely Molly in 2011 and Exists in 2014. Neither of the directors, perhaps quite wisely, has reportedly anything to do with the Blair Witch Project 3. What did I think of it? The Blair Witch Project is one of the few films we've discussed on this podcast that I've actually seen in the theater on its initial release, and as a horror fan, I remember anticipating this one for months up to opening night. Tickets were sold out, and I can't remember seeing any movie since where the audience froze in silence, with not even the sound of chewing popcorn while the traumatic events unfolded. Silence is golden in watching this movie, as the reveal is never what you see, bizarre stick men aside, but in what you hear in the woods on each night. Is that the sound of a man screaming, children laughing, sticks breaking? To this day, it's one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, although its effect does admittedly diminish over repeated viewings. Many of today's filmgoers seem to dismiss the film as just another found footage movie, compartmentalizing it with fare such as 2008's Cloverfield, 2007's Wreck, and 2012's VHS. All of these movies have merits of their own, but it seems that the found footage format has run its course. Personally, I still enjoy them, particularly 2007's terrifying Paranormal Activity, which has an entry of its own in 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. However, during a time in which home audiences are unwilling or unable to turn off the lights, turn off their phones, and pay attention for an hour and a half, it seems that some of these frights may be lost on them. No matter what you may think of the subgenre, the Blair Witch Project still deserves the accolade of being the daddy of most found footage films. Assuming, of course, that the 1979 gore fest and pseudo-snuff film Cannibal Holocaust can be considered the granddaddy. That's all I have to say about the Blair Witch Project. Tune in next week for the next episode in Season 2, in which we talk about Danny Boyle's 2008 Slumdog Millionaire. In the meantime, feel free to email me at 1001moviespodcast@gmail.com, like the podcast on Facebook, and if you've been enjoying listening, please leave a favorable review on iTunes. Until next time, happy viewing.